High above our modern cities, sleek drones hum through the sky, capturing breathtaking views and delivering packages with uncanny precision. It feels like pure 21st century magic until you glimpse something startling hidden in the cracks of ancient myths. What if I told you these age-old stories didn't just dream of flight? They sketched blueprints for it, carved into temple walls, whispered in epic poems, and woven into sacred texts are visions of winged messengers, fire-brechanical beasts, and celestial eyes watching from above, details that mirror drone technology with eerie accuracy. This isn't just coincidence, it's a conversation across millennia where humanity's oldest storytellers might have handed us the first draft of our technological future. Think about the Greek myth of Talos, a giant bronze automaton circling the island of Crete, scanning the horizon for threats, a perfect ancient mirror of today's surveillance drones. Or the Hindu epic Mahabharata, describing celestial vehicles called Vimanas, armed with fiery weapons and capable of reconnaissance missions. Even the biblical Ezekiel's whirlwind vision of a flying chariot with spinning wheels and all-seeing eyes reads like a drone's instruction manual written in prophetic verse. These myths weren't just flights of fancy, they were humanity's first attempts to articulate a longing, to conquer the skies, to see the unseen, to wield power from above. And now, thousands of years later, we've unwittingly brought those visions to life. So how did ancient cultures, without a shred of modern engineering, envision technology so precisely? Were these stories merely lucky guesses or something deeper? A shared human intuition about where innovation would one day lead us? That's the mystery we're unraveling today. We'll journey from clay tablets to circuit boards, decoding the hidden links between myth and machine. You'll discover how drone-like creatures appear in folklore from every corner of the globe, how their imagined powers align shockingly well with today's tech, and why these parallels might reveal something profound about human creativity itself. This isn't just about the past predicting the future. It's about the timeless ways we dream our world forward. Strap in. We're taking off into a story where every legend holds a clue, and the line between ancient prophecy and modern invention blurs into wonder. These ancient stories we call myths, were they actually glimpses of the future, or just layers of symbolism we're now misreading through a modern lens? To call them predictions feels too simple, like assuming our ancestors had crystal balls instead of imaginations. The truth is far more fascinating. Mythological prophecy wasn't about literal fortune-telling. It was a language, a way for cultures to process their deepest fears, hopes, and curiosities about the unknown. When a Greek oracle spoke in riddles about bronze birds or Hindu sages described flying palaces, they weren't drafting engineering schematics. They were using the vocabulary of their time to articulate humanity's oldest obsession, transcending limits. Take the Oracle of Delphi, whose cryptic visions were famously open to interpretation. Priests would decode her utterances based on current events, meaning the same prophecy could come true in multiple ways across centuries. It's eerily similar to how we now look back at these myths and say, aha, that's totally a drone, but here's the twist: what if both readings are valid? Ancient storytellers weren't just throwing darts at a board of possibilities. They understood something fundamental about human progress, that our tools would always extend our senses, our strength, our reach. Of course, they imagined eyes in the sky and messengers faster than the wind. They were mapping the uncharted territory of human ambition. The Hindu concept of Akashic records, a cosmic library of all knowledge, hints at this beautifully. Myths often speak of technology as rediscovery rather than invention, as if the secrets of flight or surveillance were already written in the fabric of the universe, waiting for us to stumble upon them. That's why drone-like beings appear independently in cultures separated by oceans and millennia. The Mayan god Hurricane rode storm winds like a pilot steering a quadcopter. Norse legends tell of Huginn and Muninn, Odin's twin ravens who circled the world as airborne scouts. These weren't lucky guesses. They were manifestations of a universal human itch to break free from the ground, to see further, to move faster. So where does that leave us? Not with a checklist of ancient tech forecasts, but with something far more powerful. Proof that innovation begins in the imagination long before it reaches the workshop. When Ezekiel described his divine chariots, wheels within wheels, he wasn't handing us a drone patent. He was participating in a conversation that stretches from campfire tales to computer chips, a conversation about what happens when we dare to reach beyond what our hands can touch. And that's the real prophecy, not the specific gadget, but the unshakable belief that the impossible is just tomorrow's project waiting to be built. Among the most striking visions of ancient aerial technology are the Vimanas, those legendary flying machines described in Hindu epics with such precision they could be blueprints for modern drones. The Mahabharata, written over 2,000 years ago, doesn't just mention these celestial chariots in passing, it documents their engineering. Some Vimanas were said to be powered by quicksilver and roaring flames, their movements controlled by intricate mechanisms. Others could hover motionless in the sky, cloaked in invisibility, or traverse continents in the blink of an eye. And then there were the weapons, beams of light that could reduce entire cities to ash, projectiles launched with terrifying accuracy. Sound familiar? Swap quicksilver for lithium batteries and beams of light for laser targeting systems, and you've got something uncomfortably close to a military drone. Historians have wrestled with these descriptions for centuries. Were the Vimanas purely symbolic metaphors for divine power or spiritual ascension? Or could they hint at lost technologies, fragments of advanced knowledge preserved in myth? The texts leave startlingly little room for vague interpretation. The Rig Veda even details a Vimana's construction, mentioning iron alloys, perfectly fitted joints, and propulsion systems. One passage describes a pilot's panic when his craft malfunctions mid-flight, spinning uncontrollably until stabilizers engage. That's not the language of metaphor, it's the anxiety of someone who's witnessed or imagined flight's perils firsthand. Skeptics argue these accounts simply reflect the limits of ancient vocabulary. When your culture hasn't invented airplanes, how else would you describe a god descending from the heavens except as a flying chariot? But then there's the matter of consistency. Vimana designs reappear in temple carvings across India, some showing disc-shaped vehicles with domed tops and what look like exhaust ports. Jain texts reference aerial battles between kingdoms, complete with mid-air collisions and evasive maneuvers. Too many details align across too many sources to dismiss as coincidence. Perhaps the most compelling clue lies in the Sanskrit word Vimana itself. It doesn't just mean chariot, it translates to measuring out or traversing space. That's less a poetic flourish and more a technical manual. Combine that with the Mahabharata's account of a Vimana's eye that could zoom in on distant enemy movements, and you're left with a chilling question. Did ancient storytellers glimpse the essence of drone warfare millennia before the first microchip? Whether by intuition or observation, they captured a truth about human innovation, that once we dream of soaring, weaponizing the sky is never far behind. This isn't about proving ancient civilizations had drones. It's about recognizing how myths encode humanity's trajectory. The Vimanas weren't prophecies, but they weren't mere fantasy either. They were the closest thing Bronze Age minds had to a user manual for the impossible. And in that sacred space between metaphor and machine, between the imagined and the invented, lies a revelation. Our oldest stories might not predict the future so much as invented, one flight of fancy at a time. The descriptions of Vimanas go far beyond vague allusions to flight. They delve into engineering specifics that mirror modern aerospace principles. Ancient texts reference materials like lightweight yet unbreakable metals, some allegedly forged in celestial fires, bearing uncanny resemblance to today's titanium alloys and carbon fiber composites. Propulsion systems described as mercury vortex engines or flames contained in iron chambers evoke modern liquid-fueled rockets or even ion thrusters. One passage from the Samaranganasatradhara details how pilots adjusted a Vimanas trajectory using precisely balanced weights and harnessed wind currents, a primitive analog to today's gyroscopic stabilization in drones. Yet skeptics rightly ask, could these details simply be imaginative extensions of existing ancient technology? After all, civilizations familiar with chariots and catapults might naturally extrapolate flying versions. The mercury described in Vimana texts might refer to actual mercury used in alchemy, a substance ancient cultures associated with transformation rather than a literal fuel source. And those eyes that scanned the horizon, they could symbolize divine omniscience, not optical sensors. Even the famed aerial battles might metaphorically represent conflicts between kingdoms or cosmic forces. But here's where the debate gets intriguing. While some descriptions align with known ancient symbolism, others defy easy explanation. The Rigveda's account of a Vimana's whirling blades that generated lift doesn't match any known mythological motif from that era, yet it perfectly describes rotor technology. Jain manuscripts mention Vimanas being stored in hangars and requiring routine maintenance, complete with lists of replacement parts. These aren't the hallmarks of pure mythology, they're the nitty-gritty of mechanical operation. Modern drone engineers have even noticed eerie parallels. The Vaimanika Shastra, a controversial early 20th century text claiming to document ancient aerial knowledge, describes energy-absorbing coatings to avoid detection, a primitive stealth technology. Another passage warns of wind shear disturbances during ascent, a phenomenon real pilots grapple with today. Coincidence, perhaps, but when multiple cultures independently describe flying machines with overlapping technical specifics, it's worth asking whether they were tapping into something deeper than fantasy. The truth likely lies somewhere between skepticism and wonder. These texts weren't recording blueprints, but they weren't merely spinning tales either. They were pushing the boundaries of the possible with the vocabulary they had. When a Sanskrit scholar wrote of a Vimana's inner furnace powering its flight, he might have been grasping toward the concept of combustion without knowing the physics. That's the real magic here, humanity's relentless drive to envision and eventually build the impossible, one era's mythology becoming another's user manual. Whether these accounts stem from lost knowledge, brilliant intuition, or something else entirely, they remind us that every technological leap begins as a flight of imagination. While the Vimanas of India represent one strand of ancient drone-like mythology, another equally compelling vision comes from the banks of the Nile. The Egyptians envisioned Ra's solar bark, a radiant vessel carrying the sun god daily across the sky without oars or sailors. This celestial craft didn't just follow the sun's path, it was the sun's path moving with flawless precision through day and night. Strip away the divine context and you're left with a striking prototype of autonomous navigation. A self-piloting vehicle maintaining its course without human intervention, guided by forces beyond mortal control. The parallels go deeper than poetic coincidence. Tomb paintings and pyramid texts describe the solar bark's mechanics with surprising detail. It wasn't merely a boat floating on cosmic waters, it adjusted its trajectory to avoid celestial obstacles, much like modern drones dodge terrain using LiDAR. Some versions even mention invisible heralds clearing its path ahead, akin to today's GPS waypoints ensuring safe routes. Most tellingly, the bark's night voyage through the underworld involved navigating 12 precise gates, each requiring perfect timing and alignment to pass. That's less like myth and more like programming waypoints into a drone's flight controller. But here's where the Egyptian vision diverges from pure technology. The Barque wasn't just a machine, it was a living ecosystem. Texts describe it regenerating itself at dawn, its hull infused with regenerative magic. Its crew consisted of gods like Maat, who maintained cosmic order, essentially personified algorithms ensuring balance. This blend of mechanics and mysticism reveals something profound. Ancient minds didn't separate function from meaning. To them, autonomy wasn't about circuitry, it was about will. The Barque moved because it chose to, because the universe demanded it. That's a far cry from silicon and servo motors, yet eerily close to how we now discuss artificial intelligence, machines making decisions within programmed parameters. Archaeological finds add fuel to the mystery. Miniature solar barks buried with pharaohs weren't just symbolic. They were meticulously crafted with copper, rails, and fittings that suggest movable components. Some scholars argue these were ritual objects, but others note their similarity to modern drone designs, compact, symmetrical, and aerodynamically sound. Even the Barque's name, Manjet, enduring in strength, hints at engineered durability rather than ethereal fantasy. So were the Egyptians predicting drones. Not literally, but their solar bark myth encapsulates the same core idea that drives drone technology today, the dream of perfect self-sustaining motion. Whether through divine will or machine learning, humanity has always sought to create vessels that transcend human limitation. Ra's Barque didn't need a pilot because it embodied an ideal, one we're still chasing, one algorithm at a time. Standing sentinel over the shores of ancient Crete, Talos wasn't just a myth. He was a chillingly precise blueprint for autonomous warfare. This towering bronze colossus, forged by the god Hephaestus, didn't merely guard the island. He patrolled it with relentless precision, circling the coast 3 times daily, his unblinking gaze scanning for intruders. Remove the divine craftsmanship, and you're left with a striking prototype of modern drone surveillance. A self-guided security system with pre-programmed routes and threat detection protocols. But Talos didn't stop at observation. Ancient texts describe his brutal efficiency, hurling boulders at approaching ships or seizing them in molten metal embrace, his body heated to unbearable temperatures. That's not just mythological flair, it's an uncanny parallel to today's armed drones with thermal targeting and non-ballistic payloads. The mechanics of Talos reveal even deeper foresight. Some versions of the myth describe a single vein running from his neck to his ankle, sealed by a bronze nail. This wasn't arbitrary symbolism. It reads like an ancient diagnosis of a machine's vulnerability, a critical power or coolant line that, if breached, would shut down the system. Compare that to modern drones' reliance on data links or fuel lines, where severing one connection can neutralize the entire unit. Even Talos' demise feels engineered. The sorceress Medea didn't defeat him with magic alone. She exploited his operational weakness, removing the nail to drain his life force, a prehistoric example of hacking a machine's failsafe. What makes Talos truly remarkable isn't just his resemblance to contemporary tech, but the cultural anxieties he embodied. The Greeks weren't just imagining a robot, they were grappling with the ethics of autonomous force. Talos obeyed orders without question, his loyalty programmed by the gods, a theme that mirrors today's debates over AI-driven weapons. His destruction of passing ships wasn't framed as heroic, but as monstrous overreach, a warning about unaccountable power. That tension between security and humanity still defines discussions around drone warfare today. Archaeological discoveries add tangible weight to the legend. Bronze Age Crete had advanced metalworking, with artisans creating intricate mechanical devices like the Phaistos disc-stamped symbols. Some scholars suggest Talos might have been inspired by early automata, actual bronze mechanisms designed to mimic movement. Even his name hints at functionality. Talos may derive from the Cretan word for sun, evoking not just his heated attacks but the concept of energy as a weapon. So was Talos a literal prediction of military drones? Probably not. But he represents something more profound, humanity's instinct to externalize its fears and ambitions into technology. When the Greeks envisioned a bronze sentry with inhuman endurance and lethal precision, they were mapping the moral landscape of automated warfare centuries before the first engine. That's the real power of myth, not foreseeing the future, but preparing us to confront it. Every debate today about drone strikes or AI ethics finds its shadow in Talos's molten footsteps, proving some dilemmas are as old as civilization itself. Long before the age of microprocessors, the myth of Talos forced a question we're still struggling to answer. Where should we draw the line between protection and peril when machines make life or death decisions? This bronze sentinel wasn't just a marvel of mythical engineering, he embodied the paradox of autonomous force. Designed to defend, yet capable of indiscriminate violence, Talos operated on a binary code far older than computers: threat or no threat, destroy or stand down. His very existence mirrors contemporary debates about drone swarms and AI targeting systems, tools praised for their precision but feared for their detachment. The mechanics behind Talos's operation reveal ancient insights into automated systems. His patrol route around Crete wasn't random. It followed a strict, repetitive pattern, much like modern drones executing grid searches over conflict zones. Greek texts describe him scanning the horizon with fiery eyes, a chilling parallel to today's infrared sensors and facial recognition algorithms. Even his fatal flaw, that single vulnerable vein, reads like a prototype of kill-switch debates. Modern military drones rely on fail-safes, encrypted signals, manual overrides, and ethical frameworks programmed into their targeting systems. Talos had none of these. His programming was absolute, his violence automatic. That absence of nuance makes him less a character and more a cautionary tale about unchecked automation. But here's where the myth transcends mere prediction. Talos wasn't destroyed by a hero's strength, but by deception, by exploiting his blind spots. Medea didn't overpower him, she outthought him, manipulating his rigid logic. That's a lesson modern militaries are still learning the hard way. From spoofed GPS signals fooling drones to adversarial AI attacks confusing algorithms, the weakest link in autonomous systems is often their inability to adapt. The ancients understood something we're just beginning to quantify. No machine, no matter how advanced, can anticipate human cunning. Ethically, Talos forces us to confront the oldest question in warfare: who bears responsibility when machines err? In the myth, blame falls on Hephaestus for creating him and King Minos for deploying him, a divine version of today's arguments about engineers versus policymakers. When a Talos-like drone strikes the wrong target, do we fault the code, the commander, or the culture that normalized automated killing? Greek audiences would have grasped this dilemma instinctively. Their myths are full of creations turning against creators, from Pandora's box to the Minotaur's labyrinth. Talos fits this tradition perfectly, a tool that amplifies both security and suffering. Perhaps most haunting is how the myth anticipates the psychological toll of machine warfare. Ancient artists often depicted Talos not as a triumphant guardian, but as a tragic figure, his bronze face frozen in something resembling anguish. That's no artistic accident. It reflects the uncanny valley of autonomous weapons, the discomfort we feel when violence lacks a human face. Modern drone operators report similar moral injury, haunted by strikes conducted through screens thousands of miles away. The Greeks, it seems, understood that distance doesn't absolve guilt, it just diffuses it. So did they predict AI warfare, not in the technical sense. But they mapped its moral contours with startling prescience. Talos isn't just a story about a robot, it's a framework for wrestling with autonomy's costs. Every time we debate drone proliferation or autonomous tanks, we're retracing steps the Greeks took 25 centuries ago. That's the real power of myth. It doesn't just imagine the future, it prepares us to face it. High above the 9 realms of Norse mythology, 2 dark shapes cut through the icy winds, Huginn and Muninn, the all-seeing ravens of Odin. These weren't mere birds, they were the god's eyes and ears, his personal reconnaissance network spanning worlds. At dawn, they'd take wing across Midgard, Niflheim, even the fiery depths of Muspelheim, gathering whispers of wars, betrayals, and secrets. By dusk, they'd return to perch on Odin's shoulders, murmuring their findings directly into his mind. Strip away the feathers and mysticism, and you've got a chillingly accurate prototype of modern surveillance drones, autonomous, far-reaching, and relentless in their pursuit of information. What makes these ravens so remarkable isn't just their function, but their design. Norse texts describe them as extensions of Odin's consciousness, biological drones with a direct neural link to their operator. Compare that to today's military drones streaming real-time footage to command centers thousands of miles away. Huginn and Muninn didn't just observe, they interpreted, filtering raw data into actionable intelligence. The Poetic Edda even hints at their advanced navigation. They could find paths between worlds, a poetic nod to waypoint routing and obstacle avoidance. Their names reveal even more, Huginn meaning thought, Muninn memory, essentially the data processing and storage functions of a modern drone's onboard computer. But Odin's ravens weren't just about efficiency, they embodied the ethical weight of surveillance. The Norse didn't celebrate their omniscience, they feared it. Sagas describe mortals shuddering as the ravens circled overhead, sensing their privacy dissolving under those black wings. That discomfort mirrors today's debates over drone surveillance in civilian spaces. When the prose Edda warns that no deed escapes Huginn's gaze, it might as well be discussing satellite tracking or facial recognition. The Norse grasped a truth we're still wrestling with. Unlimited visibility comes at the cost of autonomy. Archaeology adds a fascinating layer to the myth. Viking shield bosses and helmet crests often feature raven motifs, some with intricate interlocking patterns resembling circuitry, as if artisans were encoding the concept of networked intelligence into their art. The Gundestrup cauldron, a 1st-century silver relic, depicts a god flanked by birds, their wings outstretched like UAVs mid-flight. Even Viking navigation techniques, using ravens to find land during sea voyages, blur the line between myth and proto-technology. These weren't just symbols of war, they were blueprints for a system of control. Yet for all their power, Huginn and Muninn had limits. Odin famously fretted that one day his ravens might not return, an ancient acknowledgement of signal loss or system failure. Their intelligence gathering wasn't flawless. Myths recount times they missed hidden threats or brought misleading reports. That fallibility makes them more than fantasy, it makes them plausible. Modern drone pilots know too well how weather, jamming, or software glitches can compromise even the most advanced systems. The Norse, it seems, understood that no surveillance, divine or mechanical, is ever truly infallible. So while we didn't inherit drone technology from Viking sagas, we did inherit the dilemma they represent. Odin's ravens force us to ask, when does vigilance become intrusion? When does security undermine freedom? These myths don't offer easy answers, but they frame the question in a way that feels eerily contemporary. Perhaps that's their real lesson, not how to build flying scouts, but how to live with the consequences of seeing too much. Centuries before the Wright brothers left the ground, master craftsman Lu Ban was already sketching plans for wooden flying machines that would make modern engineers pause. According to 4th century Chinese texts, this legendary figure didn't just build furniture and temples. He constructed elaborate flying carts that could soar over enemy fortifications, gathering intelligence without detection. Descriptions of these contraptions read like an ancient spec sheet for reconnaissance drones. Bamboo frameworks fitted with intricate gears, wind-powered rotors, and even retractable wings for compact storage. Unlike the divine chariots of other cultures, Lu Ban's designs were grounded in earthly mechanics. a testament to China's early mastery of material science and aerodynamics. What sets these myths apart is their technical plausibility. Lu Ban wasn't a god or sorcerer, but a real historical figure, a genius artisan whose innovations in joinery and construction were centuries ahead of their time. When texts claim his flying carts could stay aloft for days or navigate using celestial observations, they're riffing on demonstrable skills of the era, precise clockwork mechanisms, astrolabes for navigation, and advanced woodworking techniques that allowed for astonishingly lightweight structures. A Tang Dynasty manuscript even details how one cart's wooden eyes could swivel to survey terrain below, an uncanny parallel to the gimbal-mounted cameras on today's quadcopters. But Lu Ban's story takes a darker turn that mirrors modern warfare's ethical gray zones. Legends say he later destroyed his own blueprints, fearing rulers would weaponize his inventions. That tension between technological breakthrough and military exploitation echoes in every debate about drone surveillance today. Just as contemporary engineers grapple with dual-use technology, Lu Ban's myth confronts the dilemma of innovation. Progress can't be uninvented, only controlled. Archaeological finds lend startling credence to these tales. Han Dynasty tombs have yielded miniature wooden models of bird-like devices with adjustable wings, while Ming-era texts describe mechanical hawks used for message delivery. Most compelling is the wooden J from Song Dynasty records, a glider capable of carrying small payloads over walls, described with such precision that modern reconstructions actually fly. These weren't toys, they were prototypes. Perhaps most revealing is how Lu Ban's carts were said to operate, not by magic but by harnessing natural forces. Some accounts mention silk sails catching up drafts, while others reference clockwork mechanisms storing energy like today's wound springs. This focus on sustainable flight using wind rather than fuel resonates powerfully with current drone research into solar power and dynamic soaring. The ancients may not have understood Bernoulli's principle, but they grasped its effects intuitively. Lu Ban's legacy endures in China's cutting-edge drone industry, where companies like DJI dominate global markets. That's no coincidence, it's cultural memory in action. When modern engineers design drones with folding arms for portability, they're unknowingly echoing Lu Ban's retractable wings. When AI navigation systems process terrain data, they fulfill his vision of autonomous scouts. The myth wasn't predicting the future, it was planting seeds for it. And that's the real lesson here. Humanity's greatest inventions often begin as daydreams whispered in wood shavings and parchment, waiting for the right moment to take flight. Thunderbirds soar through Native American legends like living storms, colossal winged beings whose mere wing beats could churn the skies and summon torrents. To the Lakota, they were Wakinyan. To the Kwakwakawakwa, they transformed into masks with hinged wings that clattered like thunder when danced. These weren't just spirits of the air, they were forces of nature capable of lifting whales from the ocean or hurling lightning with a glance. Scale down the mythology, replace feathers with carbon fiber, and you've got something strikingly close to today's heavy-lift cargo drones or atmospheric research aircraft. The parallels run deeper than poetic fancy. Thunderbirds didn't just fly, they manipulated weather, carving storm paths with their movements, an ancient analog to modern cloud seeding drones or hurricane-tracking UAVs. Consider the specifics. Many traditions describe thunderbirds carrying massive loads, entire canoes or houses in their talons. A task modern heavy-lift drones like the Chinook or volocopter now replicate for construction and logistics. The Tlingit spoke of thunderbirds snatching whales midair, their grip unbreakable. Today's drone grappling systems use similar principles for search and rescue operations. Even the storms they conjure find eerie echoes in contemporary geoengineering experiments. When NOAA deploys drones to release silver iodide into clouds, triggering rain, they're channeling the same impulse that prompted Zuni elders to paint thunderbird images on water jars, harnessing aerial power to shape the elements. But the connection isn't just functional, it's observational. Indigenous oral histories often position thunderbirds near mountain peaks or coastlines, precisely where modern meteorologists identify updrafts and wind shear patterns critical to storm formation. The Haida described thunderbirds diving into the sea to battle serpents, creating whirlpools. Researchers now use underwater drones to study similar vortex dynamics in ocean currents. Coincidence, perhaps, but when multiple nations independently depict winged beings interacting with atmospheric physics in consistent ways, it suggests something profound. These myths may encode generations of environmental wisdom. Archaeology offers tantalizing clues. Petroglyphs across the American West show thunderbirds with geometric wing patterns resembling the airfoil shapes engineers now use to reduce turbulence. Ancestral Puebloan Kiva murals depict the creatures with trailing lightning, an effect replicated today by drones mapping electrical activity in thunderstorms. Even the materials used in ceremonial objects hint at lost knowledge. Thunderbird regalia often incorporated copper, a metal now prized in drone components for its conductivity and lightweight properties. Some Kwakwakawakwa masks feature articulated wings that pivot at specific angles, mirroring the variable pitch rotors on vertical takeoff drones. At their core, Thunderbird myths grapple with the same question driving modern aerospace: how to navigate the boundary between human ambition and natural forces. The Ojibwe warned that thunderbirds punished those who disrupted sacred spaces, a cautionary tale that resonates in debates over drone privacy or ecological disturbance. The Navajo credit them with bringing water to parched lands, a precursor to today's drone-assisted irrigation monitoring. These stories weren't primitive fantasies, they were frameworks for understanding humanity's place within, not above, the systems that sustain life. So were Thunderbird's proto-drones, not literally, but they represent an ancient recognition of aerial possibility, a dream of mastering the skies without conquering them. When a Coast Salish artist carves a thunderbird's wings to catch the wind just so, or a Lakota elder recounts their storm-bringing power, they're preserving more than folklore. They're honoring a legacy of observation, innovation, and respect for the forces that modern technology is only beginning to comprehend. In that sense, thunderbirds don't predict the future, they challenge it to fly wisely. Ezekiel's vision begins with a whirlwind, a tempest roaring down from the north carrying something that defies mortal understanding. Not a chariot as we know it, but wheels within wheels, their rims studded with eyes, moving in perfect synchronization without turning. Fire crackles between the intersecting rings, and above it all, a throne of gleaming electrum, an alloy of gold and silver. At first glance, this sounds like pure mysticism. But strip away the prophet's ancient vocabulary, and you're left with a description so mechanically precise it could be a drone engineer's fever dream. The key lies in the details. Those eyes covering the wheels, they evoke the optical arrays on modern drones' omnidirectional cameras, providing 360-degree surveillance. The wheels within wheels that move without pivoting bear an uncanny resemblance to gyroscopic stabilization systems, where inner rotors maintain balance while outer frames adjust direction. Even the fiery glow between the wheels mirrors the plasma discharges of ion thrusters, a cutting-edge propulsion technology being tested for high-altitude drones. And that throne of electrum, it's positioned exactly where a drone's central processing unit would be the brain commanding the entire system. Scholars have wrestled with Ezekiel's account for millennia. Traditionalists see it as purely symbolic, the eyes representing God's omniscience, the wheels his omnipresence. But UFO enthusiasts like Erich von Däniken famously argued it was an extraterrestrial aircraft, a literal spacecraft witnessed by an ancient mind lacking the words to describe it. Both interpretations miss a third possibility, that Ezekiel, in his heightened spiritual state, perceived the principles of advanced technology, autonomy, aerial mobility, remote sensing, and encoded them in the only language he had. Modern aerospace offers startling parallels. The 4 living creatures Ezekiel describes beneath the wheels, each with 4 faces and 4 wings, align eerily with quadcopter drone designs' 4 rotors providing lift and maneuverability. Their synchronized movements mirror today's drone swarms, where hundreds of units operate as one intelligence. Even the likeness of a firmament above the wheels evokes the hovering capability of vertical takeoff drones holding position against gravity. And when Ezekiel describes the entire construct ascending with a noise like great waters, it's hard not to think of the deafening roar of a VTOL engine at full thrust. Yet the most provocative detail might be the most overlooked: the wheels' autonomy. Ezekiel insists they moved wherever the spirit wanted to go, independent of the creatures guiding them. That's not just poetic license, it's a dead ringer for AI-driven drones that calculate their own paths in real time. NASA engineers have even noted similarities between Ezekiel's description and experimental morphing aircraft, where wings and rotors reconfigure mid-flight for optimal efficiency. Does this mean the Bible predicted drone technology? Not in the literal sense, but Ezekiel's vision captures something fundamental about how humanity envisions the marriage of mobility and intelligence. Whether divine or mechanical, the dream of an all-seeing, untethered presence in the sky transcends time. The prophet didn't just witness a miracle, he articulated an aspiration that would take 2.5 millennia to materialize. And that's the real revelation here. Sometimes the line between sacred vision and scientific breakthrough isn't a boundary at all, just different dialects of the same enduring human quest to rise above our limits. Ezekiel's description of intersecting wheels defies simple interpretation until you view it through the lens of modern engineering. Those wheels within wheels spinning without changing direction. Picture a gyroscopic gimbal system where inner rings rotate independently to maintain stability while outer frames adjust for movement. The prophet's account even specifies the wheels could move in any of their 4 directions without turning as they went. A perfect analog for omnidirectional drone rotors that pivot seamlessly without reorienting the entire craft. Fire flashing between the spokes that could describe plasma arcing across electrodes in experimental ion thrusters, or even the corona discharge of high-voltage power systems used in some propulsion prototypes. What makes Ezekiel's vision so compelling isn't just its resemblance to technology, it's the linguistic struggle it reveals. Imagine trying to explain a smartphone to someone from the Middle Ages. You might call it a magic mirror that holds voices or a slate that paints distant scenes. That's precisely the challenge Ezekiel faced. When he described the wheel's rims as full of eyes roundabout, was he grappling with the concept of optical sensors? Ancient Hebrew had no word for camera array, but eyes would be the closest metaphor. Even his emphasis on the wheel's autonomous movement, the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels, reads like an attempt to articulate artificial intelligence without the vocabulary of algorithms. Aerospace engineers have reverse-engineered Ezekiel's account with startling results. NASA's mid-20th century Ezekiel project explored whether the passage could describe a viable aircraft configuration. They noted how the intersecting wheels align with Coulomb effect principles, where air currents adhere to curved surfaces, a phenomenon used in modern ducted fan drones. The firmament above the wheels matches the aerodynamics of ground effect vehicles, which hover efficiently just above surfaces, and that noise like great waters. Computational fluid dynamics models show certain rotor configurations produce deep, resonant frequencies resembling crashing waves. Yet the most fascinating detail lies in what Ezekiel doesn't describe. No oars, no sails, no animals pulling the chariot, just pure, self-contained motion. That absence speaks volumes. Ancient readers would instinctively look for familiar propulsion methods. Their exclusion suggests Ezekiel witnessed something truly unprecedented. It's the same cognitive leap required when early aviators first saw wingless helicopters hover, a violation of intuitive physics. The prophet's insistence that the wheels sparkled like topaz might even hint at energy emission, perhaps describing the ionized glow of high-voltage systems or thruster exhaust. This isn't about proving Ezekiel saw drones. It's about recognizing how humanity's descriptive limits shape our understanding of breakthroughs. When the prophet gasped at wheels moving wherever the Spirit wanted, he wasn't just recording a miracle, he was documenting the universal struggle to articulate the unimaginable. Every time a modern engineer sketches a radical new drone design, they're participating in that same ancient tradition, translating the impossible into the language of the possible, one imperfect metaphor at a time. High above the deserts of ancient Arabia, King Solomon's legendary carpet unfurled like a living storm, a vast expanse of woven wind carrying armies, palaces, even entire ecosystems across continents in the blink of an eye. Islamic traditions describe it responding not to ropes or reins, but to the whispers of the wind itself, darting between cities with the speed of a sandstorm. Scale down the dimensions, replace silk threads with carbon fiber, and you've got the perfect metaphor for today's drone delivery networks, autonomous, lightning-fast, and untethered by earthly roads. But was this just poetic exaggeration or something more? The parallels between Solomon's carpet and modern logistics drones go deeper than surface-level fantasy. Consider the mechanics. Persian manuscripts detail how the carpet's edges never frayed, how it adjusted its size to carry any payload from a single rider to 4,000 men, a prototype of adaptive cargo systems used in today's heavy-lift drones. The wind propelling it wasn't random. It obeyed Solomon's commands like programmed flight paths, navigating storms and mountains without error. That's not just magic, it's an ancient vision of GPS-guided navigation. Even the carpet's most fantastical trait, its ability to shield passengers from the elements, mirrors the climate-controlled compartments in medical delivery, drones transporting organs or vaccines. But here's where the myth diverges into prophecy. Solomon's carpet didn't just move objects, it collapsed time and space. A 14th century Sufi text claims it could traverse a month's journey in moments, anticipating our era of same-hour Amazon deliveries and emergency drone drops. The speed wasn't its only marvel, it was the democratization of access. Like modern drones bridging gaps in rural healthcare or disaster zones, the carpet symbolized a world where distance no longer dictated privilege. That's the real genius of the legend. It wasn't about a flying rug, but about erasing barriers. Archaeology adds tantalizing context. Pre-Islamic petroglyphs in Yemen show rectangular objects hovering above caravans, while Abbasid-era astrolabes include diagrams of wind routes matching high-altitude jet streams now used by solar drones. Even the materials hinted at forgotten knowledge. Some versions describe the carpet woven with threads of smoke and lightning, a phrase that evokes the conductive nanomaterials coating today's drone wings to dissipate static. The ethical dimensions resonate just as strongly. Islamic scholars debated whether Solomon's carpet was a divine gift or a test of humility, a warning against the arrogance of unchecked power. That tension mirrors contemporary fears of drone surveillance, overreach, or skyways choked with delivery bots. The legend's climax, where the carpet is lost after Solomon's death, feels eerily prescient, technology outliving the wisdom to wield it responsibly. So were flying carpets blueprints for drones, not literally, but they crystallized a hunger humanity is still trying to satisfy, the dream of frictionless connection. When a Bedouin storyteller described Solomon summoning the wind with a snap of his fingers, he wasn't just spinning a tale. He was giving shape to an impulse that would one day birth quadcopters buzzing over Tokyo and Nairobi alike. The stubborn, beautiful belief that the sky should never be a limit, only a highway. In the shadow-draped hills of Zulu territory, elders still whisper about the Abathakathi, the night-flying witches who ride the wind on woven mats, vanishing into clouds only to reappear where least expected. These weren't just supernatural bogeymen, they were the original stealth operatives of African folklore, masters of aerial espionage centuries before radar-absorbent coatings or silent electric propulsion. Descriptions of their flights read like a field manual for modern reconnaissance drones, shape-shifting to avoid detection, hovering unseen above villages to gather secrets, even deploying familiars in the form of owls or bats to scout targets. The parallels aren't superficial. When a Zulu storyteller describes a witch's mat blending into the night sky, it's hard not to think of today's low observable drones with their anti-reflective coatings and thermal camouflage. The Abathakathi's tactics reveal an ancient grasp of aerial stealth principles. Oral traditions emphasize their avoidance of moonlight, a poetic nod to avoiding detection angles, much like drones avoiding radar sweeps. Their ability to steal voices from sleeping villages mirrors the audio surveillance capabilities of modern micro-drones, even their purported weakness being vulnerable to scattered grain or ash that revealed their invisible presence echoes contemporary counter-drone measures using chaff or particulates to disrupt cloaking systems. This wasn't just imaginative storytelling, it was a sophisticated exploration of aerial vulnerability and concealment. Archaeological finds deepen the connection. Zulu ceremonial mats from the 19th century show intricate geometric patterns that, when studied aerodynamically, resemble the faceted designs of stealth aircraft surfaces that scatter rather than reflect detection. Some warrior shields depict owl-like faces with exaggerated ear cavities, a design now recognized as ideal for acoustic stealth. Even the witches' familiars find eerie parallels in today's drone swarms, where smaller decoy units distract while larger systems conduct primary missions. But the true brilliance of these myths lies in their ethical framework. Unlike Western tales that often portray flying witches as purely malevolent, Zulu lore presents a nuanced duality. The Abathakathi could be both protectors and predators, depending on who controlled them, a prescient allegory for drone warfare's moral ambiguity. When a Sangoma healer in oral traditions redirects a witch's flight to track poachers or locate missing children, it mirrors modern debates about using drones for conservation or search and rescue versus warfare. Perhaps most striking is how these stories anticipated the psychological impact of unseen surveillance. Zulu hunters spoke of the itch between the shoulder blades when Abathakathi watched from above, an instinctive dread modern soldiers now call drone paranoia. The folklore even includes countermeasures, certain plant smokes that allegedly grounded the witches, foreshadowing today's electronic jamming systems. These narratives weren't predicting stealth drones, they were doing something far more profound, encoding generations of observation about predation, visibility, and power into myth. When a Zulu elder describes a witch's mat dissolving into heat haze, they're not just spinning a tale, they're articulating a timeless truth about technology and terror, one that hums invisibly over our drone-haunted present. Kukulkan, the feathered serpent of Mayan legend, didn't just slither across temple steps, he ruled the skies. This winged deity, depicted as both serpent and bird, served as the ultimate celestial messenger, bridging the gap between gods and mortals with rhythmic precision. His movements weren't arbitrary. Ancient texts describe him tracing exact paths across the heavens, returning to specific coordinates at fixed intervals. Sound familiar? It's the same flight pattern predictability we now expect from delivery drones crisscrossing city skylines, but Kukulkan wasn't alone. The Dresden Codex, a surviving Mayan manuscript, shows bird deities like Vukub-Kakwix and Hunapu performing aerial reconnaissance, their jeweled eyes scanning the earth below, a dead ringer for today's surveillance drones with optical zoom capabilities. The parallels extend beyond function into physical design. Mayan murals at Bonampak depict avian gods with outstretched wings locked at precise angles, their symmetry mirroring the fixed-wing drones used for long-range mapping. Kukulkan's most iconic representation, the serpent's body undulating beneath bird wings, uncannily resembles modern hybrid drones that combine rotary blades for vertical takeoff with fixed wings for efficient cruising. Even the materials hold clues. Feathers in Mayan art weren't just decorative. They symbolized lightness and endurance, much like the carbon fiber composites that give drones their strength-to-weight ratio. When a Mayan artist inlaid jade into a bird god's eyes, they might as well have been prototyping the light-sensitive lenses in today's multispectral cameras. Warfare reveals even deeper connections. The Popol Vuh describes celestial birds dropping fiery projectiles on enemies, an ancient parallel to precision drone strikes. Tikol's carvings show messenger birds relaying battlefield intelligence between generals, their beaks stylized into funnel shapes that look suspiciously like directional microphones. Most haunting are the death owls of Mayan lore, nocturnal hunters said to extract souls silently from their victims. Their stealth tactics, no flapping, just gliding, align perfectly with silent drone operations using brushless motors and noise-dampening propellers. But here's where the Mayan vision transcends mere technology. These bird deities weren't just tools, they were embodiments of cosmic order. Kukulkan's scheduled descents during equinoxes reflected an obsession with cyclical precision that now defines automated drone scheduling. The god's ability to see through clouds mirrors today's LiDAR-equipped drones penetrating forest canopies for archaeological surveys. Even their limitations carried meaning. Unlike omnipotent gods, Mayan avian messengers had defined ranges and vulnerabilities. Some legends tell of them being grounded by storms or deceived by mirror signals. That's not mythic weakness, it's an ancient acknowledgement of technological constraints we still grapple with today. The real magic lies in how these stories were preserved. Mayan codices used glyphs of birds not just as letters but as interactive diagrams, folding their wings to show altitude changes, tilting their tails to indicate turns. Modern drone pilots use nearly identical symbols in flight logs and control interfaces. When a Palanque scribe drew concentric circles around a descending deity, was he illustrating vortex ring state, a dangerous aerodynamic condition drone operators now train to avoid? We'll never know for certain, but the overlap suggests something profound. Humanity's aerial aspirations haven't evolved as much as we think. The language has just shifted from mythology to engineering, from flint knives to flight controllers, from blood sacrifice to battery life, all while chasing the same ancient dream of mastering the sky. Deep in the mist-shrouded forests of Japan, the Tengu lurked beaked, winged spies who watched humanity with piercing crimson eyes. These weren't just mountain demons from folklore. They were the original masters of aerial surveillance, blending supernatural prowess with eerie parallels to modern drone espionage. With faces half human, half crow, and feathered cloaks that let them vanish into tree canopies, Tengu epitomized stealth observation centuries before thermal imaging. Ancient scrolls depict them perched on pine branches, tracking travelers' every move with fan-like ears that caught whispers from miles away, a mythological prototype of today's drone-mounted parabolic microphones. But Tengu weren't passive observers. They manipulated human affairs with the precision of hackers breaching a network. Legends tell of them swapping road signs to mislead samurai, mimicking voices to sow discord, even stealing sacred text to hoard knowledge. Tactics that mirror modern cyber drone attacks, spoofing GPS signals or intercepting communications. The Konjaku Monogatari-shu, a 12th century anthology, describes a Tengu disguising itself as a monk to infiltrate a temple, only to vanish skyward with stolen scriptures. Replace the feathers with carbon fiber, and you've got a quadcopter executing a corporate data heist. Their most chilling similarity to drones lies in their psychological warfare. Just as contemporary militaries used drone buzz to demoralize insurgents, Tengu weaponized sound. Farmers spoke of karasu tengu, crow demons, emitting shrieks that induced panic, while warrior accounts mention unnerving flute music from invisible sources, early acoustic harassment akin to today's LRAD systems deployed from UAVs. The Edo period, Tengu no Tsume, scrolls even show them dropping stones or firebrands on villages, foreshadowing the loitering munitions now haunting modern battlefields. The ethical warnings in these myths resonate loudly today. Tengu weren't inherently evil, they punished arrogance and guarded nature's secrets. Stories like the Tengu's Fan warn how their surveillance could expose corruption or humiliate the prideful echoing debates about drone journalism uncovering corporate malfeasance or police misconduct. Yet other tales, like the Tengu who tormented boastful swordsmen by recording their private failures, serve as ancient analogues to revenge drone usage or unauthorized surveillance. Archaeology adds tangible weight to the legends. Samurai armor featured Tengu-do chest plates with layered, feather-like scales designed to deflect arrows, a design now studied for lightweight drone armor. No theater masks depicting Tengu have exaggerated nasal cavities that, when analyzed, function as acoustic amplifiers enhancing directional hearing. Even their iconic geta wooden sandals found in shrines have curved soles resembling the airfoil shapes used in drone wing designs. What makes Tengu mythology so prescient isn't just their resemblance to drones, it's their cultural function as boundary keepers. They enforced moral lines between observation and intrusion, between necessary watchfulness and predatory stalking. When a medieval woodblock print shows a Tengu shredding a spy's net with its claws, it's not just fantasy, it's an 11th century take on anti-surveillance activism. In an age where drone cameras peer over fences and AI analyzes our movements, these stories demand we ask, when does vigilance become violation? The Tengu knew the answer lay not in the wings of the watcher, but in the ethics of the watch. The legacy of Japan's Tengu doesn't end in ancient scrolls. It soars straight into the neon-lit skies of modern anime and sci-fi, where their crow-like cunning and aerial dominance have become the blueprint for countless drone narratives. Take the iconic Kara's anime series, where shape-shifting Tengu warriors evolve into cybernetic enforcers, their beaks replaced by sleek visors, their wings humming with rotor blades. Or the ghostly surveillance units in Ghost in the Shell, cloaked in optical camouflage just like Tengu vanishing into mist. These aren't just aesthetic nods, they're proof that the archetype of the winged watcher has never left our collective imagination, only upgraded its firmware. Studio Ghibli's Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind offers one of the most poignant links. The film's insect-like airships, with their bulbous eyes and unnerving silence, echo Tengu legends of mushy soma, spirit messengers that moved with unnatural precision. When Nausicaa tames one of these machines, it mirrors the Shinto belief that Tengu could be appeased by the pure-hearted, a metaphor for humanity's fraught relationship with autonomous technology. Even the radar dishes on these drones resemble the exaggerated ears of Tengu masks, designed to hear threats from impossible distances. Hollywood hasn't been immune to the influence either. The drone swarms in Blade Runner 2049, with their synchronized movements and predatory patience, feel like a direct translation of Tengu folklore's Hyasub lesser demons who moved in flocks to overwhelm victims. Their eerie stillness between attacks mirrors the Edo period tales of Tengu freezing mid-flight to observe before striking. And let's not forget the iconic spider tank from Ghost in the Shell, a multi-limbed killing machine that moves with the same unsettling grace as a Tengu perched on a temple ledge, both equally deadly in their stillness. Video games have taken the baton and sprinted. In the Tao Hu Project series, the Tengu Run newspaper uses camera drones to document supernatural events, a playful riff on their role as information brokers in feudal Japan. Shadow Tactics Blades of the Shogun features a Tengu costumed spy who uses a kite-mounted camera, a literal bridge between myth and steampunk surveillance. Even Cyberpunk 2077 rogue drones with their jerky movements and distorted vocal taunts channel the trickster essence of Tengu disrupting mortal affairs. What makes these modern adaptations so compelling isn't just their visual flair, it's how they preserve the myth's ethical tension. Just as Tengu were both protectors and provocateurs, today's pop culture drones oscillate between saviors and saboteurs. The humanitarian delivery drones in Children of Men fulfill the Tengu's role as intercessors, while the assassin bots in Call of Duty embody their capacity for ruthless judgment. This duality speaks to a timeless truth. The tools we create to watch over us will always reflect both our noblest aspirations and our darkest impulses. So the next time you see a drone in a film, pause for a second. That sleek, silent observer overhead, it's not just cutting-edge CGI. It's the latest incarnation of a story first told centuries ago by firelight about creatures who mastered the sky not with circuits but with feathers and cunning. The Tengu never left, they just traded their cloaks for carbon fiber, proving that some myths aren't bound by time, only by the limits of our imagination. Alchemists hunched over their crucibles didn't just seek to turn lead into gold, they dreamed of breathing life into clay, metal, and glass. Among their most haunting creations were the homunculi, tiny artificial beings said to flutter through candlelit laboratories with uncanny purpose. Paracelsus, the 16th century Swiss polymath, left detailed instructions for crafting these miniature sentinels. Seal human semen and arcane herbs in a glass vessel, bury it in horse manure for 40 days, and watch as a translucent winged creature stirred to life. Strip away the mysticism and you're left with something startlingly familiar, a blueprint for micro-drones, biohybrid robotics, and autonomous agents so small they blur the line between machine and organism. The parallels between homunculi and modern micro-aerial vehicles run deeper than surface-level whimsy. Paracelsus described his creations as possessing the faculty of sight and motion, able to navigate labyrinthine castle corridors undetected, an eerie match for today's palm-sized surveillance drones with obstacle avoidance algorithms. The horse manure incubation process, that could be read as a crude metaphor for biomimetic engineering, where heat and organic decomposition simulate the conditions for emergent complexity. Even the homunculi's alleged ability to whisper secrets to their creators mirrors the data transmission of nanodrones relaying battlefield intelligence back to operators. But the alchemists weren't alone in these visions. Arabic manuscripts from Jabir ibn Hayyan's school detail flying jinn bound in brass spheres, autonomous flyers guided by magnetic forces, a precursor to modern magnetically stabilized micro-drones. Chinese alchemical texts speak of paper crane souls animated by Chi-infused inks that could track targets across cities, foreshadowing today's biodegradable surveillance drones. Even the golem of Jewish mysticism, animated by sacred inscriptions, finds its descendant in drones programmed with machine learning algorithms that learn their environments. What makes these recipes so compelling isn't their literal feasibility, but their conceptual foresight. Alchemists understood that true miniaturization required a paradigm shift, not just shrinking existing designs, but reimagining life's building blocks. When Paracelsus wrote of homunculi drawing sustenance from moonlight or magnetic fields, he was grappling with the same power constraints that limit micro-drone flight times today. His solution, external energy harvesting, is precisely what engineers now pursue with solar-powered nanodrones and wireless charging stations. Modern laboratories have inadvertently fulfilled these ancient ambitions. Harvard's RoboBee, a graphene-winged micro-drone lighter than a paperclip, mirrors the homunculus in both scale and fragility. DARPA micro-aircraft modeled after dragonflies achieved the alchemist's dream of blending organic and mechanical motion. Even the latest biohybrid drones, incorporating living muscle tissue for flight, echo Paracelsus' vision of life synthesized from base materials. The difference. Where alchemists saw magic, we see material science, but the end result is equally wondrous. Perhaps the most profound connection lies in the ethical unease surrounding both creations. Medieval warnings about homunculi gaining forbidden knowledge or turning against their makers parallel contemporary fears of AI-driven micro-drones evading human control. The alchemical text's insistence on binding these creatures with sigils and prayers reads like an ancient analog to encryption and kill switches. Both traditions wrestle with the same question: when we create life, or its simulacrum who ultimately holds the reins. In the end, the alchemist's true legacy isn't in their failed elixirs, but in their relentless imagination. They didn't predict micro-drones so much as they laid the conceptual groundwork for a future where the boundaries between born and built dissolve. Every time a researcher sends a swarm of insect-sized drones into a collapsed building, they're not just advancing robotics, they're proving that the most enduring alchemy is the transformation of myth into methodology, one wingbeat at a time. Medieval monks bent over candlelit manuscripts didn't just document saints and sinners, they sketched the future of flight in the margins. Among their most astonishing pages flutter mechanical birds, described with such precision they blur the line between divine miracle and early robotics. Take Archbishop Albert's legendary iron eagle, said to have soared over Cologne Cathedral in the 13th century, its metal wings clanking as it circled the spires before returning to its creator's hand. Dismiss it as pious fiction, and you'll miss the revolutionary truth hidden in the tale. This wasn't just fantasy, but a fossilized memory of Europe's first drone prototypes, born from the marriage of sacred symbolism and medieval engineering genius. The Archbishop's eagle wasn't an isolated marvel. Benedictine libraries preserve accounts of spring-powered doves that flapped around banquet halls, while Byzantine emperors dazzled ambassadors with golden birds that sang from automated thrones. These weren't mere toys, they were demonstrations of a radical idea taking root. That flight could be engineered, not just granted by the divine. The Luttrell Psalter, a 14th century illuminated manuscript, shows a particularly telling detail: a bird with gear like feathers, its wings articulated like clockwork. That's no artistic flourish, it's a coded blueprint. What makes these medieval automata so groundbreaking isn't just their mechanics, but their purpose. Unlike mythological creatures, these were functional objects designed for specific tasks. The Iron Eagle, a ceremonial messenger, echoing today's drone light shows at major events. The Singing Throne Birds, early attempts at ambient surveillance, their hollow bodies likely concealing tubes that allowed hidden operators to listen to court conversations, a precursor to modern eavesdropping drones. Even the spring-loaded doves served as proto-targets for archery practice, anticipating today's remote-controlled aerial targets used by militaries. The materials tell their own story. Medieval craftsmen didn't have lithium batteries or carbon fiber, but they pushed available technology to its limits. Analysis of a surviving 15th century mechanical falcon revealed hammered copper wings with near-perfect weight distribution, while reconstructed designs show how counterweights and silk cords could mimic avian flight dynamics. Some accounts mention mercury-filled chambers in these birds' bodies, possibly used to stabilize flight, an ancient analog to gyroscopic systems, but the real innovation lay in their autonomy. The chronicler William of Malmesbury describes a silver dove that circled Westminster Abbey during coronations, responding to hidden magnets in the walls. That's not magic, it's primitive waypoint navigation. Other texts speak of birds programmed to complete set routes by winding cords around internal spools, a mechanical version of today's pre-programmed drone flight paths. When a Strasbourg clock tower's mechanical cock crowed at fixed intervals, it wasn't just keeping time. It was demonstrating the kind of repetitive precision that defines modern autonomous systems. Yet for all their ingenuity, these creations carried the same ethical weight as their mythological predecessors. Church debates raged over whether mechanical birds mocked God's creation, foreshadowing today's unease about drones violating natural spaces. A particularly haunting woodcut shows a monk's automaton falcon refusing to return, circling endlessly beyond recall, a medieval warning about losing control of our creations. The legacy of these mechanical birds soars straight into the modern era. Leonardo da Vinci's ornithopter drawings borrowed from medieval designs, while early aviation pioneers studied cathedral automata for wing articulation principles. Next time you see a drone buzz past, remember its genealogy doesn't start in a Silicon Valley lab, but in the workshops of monks and metalworkers who looked at a bird and saw not just a creature but a challenge. If nature could fly, why couldn't we? Their answer, hammered out in iron and ambition, still echoes in every rotor's word today. Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks crackle with the energy of a mind tearing down the boundary between myth and mechanism. His famous ornithopter designs those intricate wings of linen and wood, those pulleys mimicking sinew and bone, weren't born in a vacuum. They were the culmination of 1,000 years of human yearning, traceable straight back to the waxen wings of Icarus and the feathered cloaks of shamanic flight. What set Leonardo apart wasn't just his engineering genius, but his willingness to treat ancient myths as rough drafts rather than fairy tales. His sketches reveal the DNA of legend, jointed wings inspired by medieval griffins, control surfaces echoing the tail feathers of Quetzalcoatl, even a pilot's harness that mirrors the straps binding Norse Valkyries to their steeds. The mythic connection goes deeper than aesthetics. Da Vinci's designs grappled with the same fundamental challenge that haunts every drone engineer today: how to translate biological intelligence into mechanical precision. His studies of bird flight didn't just document aerodynamics, they sought to reverse engineer the magic societies once attributed to gods. Where Greek myth gave Daedalus wax and feathers, Da Vinci used starched linen and levers, but the goal remained identical: human dominion over the sky. His ornithopter's flapping mechanism, with its rhythmic upstroke and downstroke, didn't just mimic nature, it fulfilled an archetype as old as the Babylonian Etana, who soared heavenward on an eagle's back. Yet Da Vinci's true breakthrough was psychological. Previous inventors had built flying machines as acts of devotion or folly, but he approached flight as a systematic dialogue between legend and geometry. His notebooks show winged demons from medieval manuscripts annotated with fluid dynamics equations, and dragon wings redesigned as optimized airfoils. This wasn't just engineering, it was alchemy, transmuting the lead of superstition into the gold of empirical design. The ornithopter's failure to fly matters less than its revelation. The dreams behind our oldest stories weren't delusions but prototypes. Modern drone technology inherits this mythic lineage in startling ways. The ornithopter's struggle with weight distribution foreshadowed today's quadcopter compromises between battery life and payload. Da Vinci's studies of avian predator strikes informed the attack angles of military drones, just as his observations of seed dispersal inspired micro-drone swarm behavior. Even his abortive aerial screw, long dismissed as fanciful, finds redemption in today's ducted fan vertical takeoff drones. The through line is unmistakable. Every advancement in unmanned flight owes as much to humanity's storied past as to its silicon present. The lesson here isn't that Da Vinci decoded ancient prophecies, but that he recognized myths as humanity's first R&D lab. When a 21st century engineer builds a drone that hovers like a dragonfly or navigates like a homing pigeon, they're participating in the same timeless conversation. Our ancestors dreamed in feathers and fire. We build with alloys and algorithms. The language has changed, but the longing remains, to slip the surly bonds of earth and touch the untouchable sky. Da Vinci's feverish sketches of flying machines gathered dust for centuries. dismissed as beautiful impossibilities until engineers at the University of Maryland unspooled a carbon fiber wing in 2011 that flapped like a bird and actually flew. This wasn't just a tribute to Renaissance genius, it was proof that Da Vinci's vision had been waiting for material science to catch up. Today's drones don't merely borrow his concepts, they complete them. His spiral-shaped aerial screw, mocked as fanciful for 500 years, now soars in the form of coaxial drones using dual rotors for precision hovering. Those meticulous studies of bird tendons and wing flexion, they've been resurrected in bio-inspired drones with morphing wings that adjust mid-flight like peregrine falcons diving for prey. Even his haunting drawings of parachutes find eerie fulfillment in drone recovery systems, where failing quadcopters deploy mini-chutes to land safely. The most striking fulfillment lies in Da Vinci's obsession with perspective, his belief that true flight required seeing the world from above. Modern mapping drones equipped with LiDAR now execute this exactly as he imagined, stitching together aerial views into cohesive landscapes, just as his bird's-eye maps of Italian cities predicted. His designs for a mechanical bird that could turn its head to scan terrain, that's standard in surveillance drones today, where gimbal-mounted cameras pan and tilt with uncanny resemblance to his sketches. Even his unfinished glider with adjustable wings foreshadowed the adaptive flight controls used by military drones to stabilize in turbulent winds. Yet Da Vinci's greatest contribution wasn't individual mechanisms, it was his holistic vision of flight as a symbiotic dance between human and machine. His ornithopter designs included not just wings, but harnesses that would let pilots shift their weight like hang gliders, anticipating the motion capture suits drone pilots now use to control UAVs with body movements. Those intricate pulley systems meant to mimic avian musculature, they've evolved into the tendon-like cabling in robotic drones that resist damage by healing snapped lines mid-flight. Even his fanciful flying ship concepts combining sails and wings find echoes in hybrid drones that switch between fixed wing and rotary flight for maximum efficiency. The real magic lies in how modern engineers have hacked Da Vinci's failures into breakthroughs, his inability to solve the power-to-weight ratio. The reason his ornithopter never left the page led directly to today's ultra-lightweight graphene batteries and solar cell wings. That notorious aerial screw sketch, long dismissed as a helicopter precursor, actually predicted the vortex ring state phenomenon, a dangerous aerodynamic condition drone pilots now train to avoid. Even his sketches of bat wings, which contemporaries called grotesque, inspired the flexible membrane wings on the Batbot, a drone that flaps silently for covert operations. This isn't about ancient designs magically matching modern tech. It's about recognizing that Da Vinci treated mythology as a challenge rather than fantasy. When he sketched Icarus not as a cautionary tale, but as an engineering problem annotating the wax wings with notes on heat resistance, he laid the groundwork for drones that now monitor volcanoes. His belief that once you have tasted flight, you will forever walk the earth with your eyes turned skyward didn't just inspire aviation, it encoded the DNA of drone culture. Every time a quadcopter tilts its camera downward, it's seeing the world as Da Vinci dared us to, not from the ground looking up, but from the heavens looking back. What separates Da Vinci from other dreamers was his refusal to compartmentalize. To him, the mechanical and the mystical weren't opposites, they were ingredients. Modern drone teams have unconsciously adopted this mindset, blending biology with robotics in ways that would make the old master grin. The DL Fly Micro, a dragonfly drone with see-through wings, mirrors his fusion of art and aerodynamics. Solar-powered drones circling the stratosphere fulfill his visions of eternal flight machines. Even the ethical dilemmas of drone warfare echo his conflicted notebooks, where flying machines flip between instruments of wonder and weapons of war. So next time you see a delivery drone navigating city canyons or a search and rescue UAV threading through rubble, remember, you're not just watching cutting-edge tech. You're witnessing a 500-year-old conversation between myth and mechanism, where every solved equation and refined alloy brings us closer to the dreams our ancestors dared to sketch in the margins of possibility. Da Vinci didn't predict the future. He left a trail of breadcrumbs in ink and intuition, trusting that someday we'd have the tools to follow. By the smoky glow of gas lamps and the hiss of steam pistons, the 19th century birthed a new kind of myth, one where technology, not magic, held the keys to the sky. Jules Verne's fantastical flying machines didn't just imagine the future. They reshaped ancient dreams of flight into brass and gear prophecies. Take the Albatross from Robert the Conqueror, a colossal aerial ship with 37 rotors thundering like mechanical dragon wings. This wasn't just fiction, it was Icarus reimagined with rivets and hydraulics, a bridge between the feathered serpents of old and the carbon fiber drones of tomorrow. Verne's genius lay in his fusion of mythic archetypes with cutting-edge science. His aerial vehicles didn't defy physics, they weaponized it, turning the wind-controlling powers of storm gods into equations of lift and thrust. The Albatross's ability to hover motionless for surveillance, a steampunk prototype of modern drone loitering capabilities. Its modular design with detachable reconnaissance gondolas foreshadowed today's swarming drone tactics. Even the ship's vulnerability, sabotaged by its own crew when tyranny loomed, mirrors contemporary debates about autonomous weapons and human override systems. But Verne wasn't alone in this mechanical myth-making. H.G. Wells's The War in the Air envisioned unmanned aerials patrolling battlefields, their clockwork brains making split-second decisions, a chilling parallel to AI-driven drone strikes. Meanwhile, Albert Robider's illustrations for the 20th century showed camera-equipped aeroscopes broadcasting aerial views to home theaters, decades before live drone feeds became routine. These weren't just flights of fancy, they were cultural rehearsals for technological inevitabilities, dressing primal human desires, for dominion, for vision, for transcendence, in top hats and tailcoats. The steampunk aesthetic itself reveals a deeper truth. All those exposed gears and hissing valves weren't merely decorative, they symbolized transparency in an age of industrialization's mysteries. Just as ancient cultures personified storms as gods, Victorians anthropomorphized machinery, giving it the same mythic weight. A drone's whirring rotors would have felt right at home in Verne's world. Not because he predicted them, but because he understood that every era recasts its flying demons and angels in the materials at hand. Where Babylonians saw winged lions, Victorians saw steam-powered ornithopters. Where Mayans painted celestial messengers, Edison's contemporaries sketched electric spy kites. Archaeology confirms this conceptual lineage. Recovered schematics from 19th century inventors like Charles Delche now show airships with mirror-polished eyes for navigation, while Clement Audeur's bat-winged Eole borrowed directly from Gothic gargoyles. Even the Wright brothers' early notebooks reference Jules Verne's calculations on airflow, proving that fiction had become a feedback loop for innovation. The most telling artifact, a British patent from 1883 for an aerial automaton with clockwork-guided wings, designed to carry messages, the literal birth certificate of the postal drone. Ultimately, these steampunk visions matter because they reveal a pattern. Technology doesn't replace myth, it relocates it. When a modern drone pilot surveys a wildfire or delivers medicine, they're channeling the same yearning that made Verne's characters carve the sky with brass propellers. The materials grow lighter, the engines quieter, but the dream remains unchanged, to slip gravity's grasp and see the world as something grander. That's why today's engineers still study Robert the Conqueror. Not for its blueprints, but for its soul, a reminder that every revolution in flight begins not in a lab, but in the stories we dare to tell about what's possible. The pulsing neon glow of 20th century science fiction didn't just predict drones, it resurrected ancient myths and dressed them in chrome. Isaac Asimov's robot spies from Robot, flitting through cities like mechanical swallows, weren't born in a vacuum. They were the latest incarnation of Odin's ravens and Ezekiel's wheeled watchers, reborn for the atomic age. Science fiction became the new mythology, swapping feathered wings for jet propulsion but keeping the core obsession intact, eyes in the sky, untethered from human frailty. Take the War of the Worlds heat ray, wielding tripods, less alien invaders than nightmarish updates of Talos the Bronze Sentinel, stalking the landscape with the same merciless autonomy. H.G. Wells even described their movements with eerie precision, advancing in mechanical synchrony, pausing to survey, then striking without hesitation. That's not just fiction. It's a blueprint for today's autonomous drone swarms, down to the chilling absence of a human hand guiding the trigger. Mid-century sci-fi sharpened these visions into razor-edged prophecies. Philip K. Dick's Ubik featured drone-like scanners that policed thoughts, echoing the Tengu's mind, reading surveillance from Japanese folklore. Arthur C. Clarke's The City and the Stars imagined self-repairing aerial sentinels patrolling a utopia, a high-tech reimagining of Kukulkan's celestial patrols over Mayan cities. Even children's media got in on the act. The Jetsons' robotic maid Rosie wasn't just a flying domestic helper. She was the homunculus myth reborn as suburban convenience, a tiny autonomous agent buzzing around homes like a proto-smart drone. What makes these sci-fi visions so compelling isn't their accuracy, but their self-awareness. Authors like Ray Bradbury openly acknowledged mining ancient myths for futuristic tales. His Fahrenheit 451 mechanical hound, a drone-like creature that hunts by scent and never tires, was inspired by Anubis's jackal-headed enforcers from Egyptian lore. Every future is just a past waiting to happen, Bradbury quipped, recognizing that humanity's oldest stories encode our deepest technological anxieties. The Cold War intensified these parallels. Dr. Strangelove's nuclear-armed drones circling the planet mirrored Norse legends of Huginn and Muninn perpetually orbiting Midgard. 2001, A Space Odyssey's HL 9000, with its unblinking red eye and emotionless logic, updated the myth of the homunculus, an artificial being whose loyalty could curdle into menace. Even Star Trek's expendable drones, launched from starships, fulfilled the same role as the Abathakathi's familiars in Zulu tales, scouting ahead to absorb danger so their creators wouldn't have to. Yet for all their futurism, these stories kept circling back to the same ethical quicks, and that troubled ancient myths. Asimov's 3 laws of robotics weren't just programming constraints. They were a retelling of the binding sigils medieval alchemists used to control their homunculi. Blade Runner's replicants, with their programmed lifespans, echoed the Bronze Age fear of creations outliving their creators' wisdom. And when the Terminator's Skynet drones turned against humanity, it played out like Talos' rampage across Crete, proving some warnings transcend millennia. Science fiction's greatest contribution wasn't predicting drone technology. It was providing a cultural testing ground for the moral weight such technology carries. Every time a Black Mirror episode shows drones weaponizing social media data, or a Ghost in the Shell sequence depicts hive mind UAVs, they're not innovating, they're translating. The language has changed from incantations to algorithms, from sacred rituals to user agreements, but the conversation remains the same: how to harness the power of the unseen watcher without becoming enslaved to it. That's why these stories endure. From the cuneiform tablets describing Ninurta's flying weapons to the latest sci-fi blockbuster, humanity keeps retelling the same epic with updated special effects. The drones buzzing over our cities today aren't just machines, they're characters in the oldest story we know, one where the price of wings is always paid in vigilance. Today's drones don't just resemble ancient myths, they complete them with startling precision. Consider the humble Amazon delivery quadcopter lowering a package onto a doorstep. 5,000 years ago, the Hindu god Agni raced across skies in a flaming chariot, distributing gifts from the gods. The shape has changed from divine vehicle to plastic rotors, but the dream remains identical: instantaneous delivery, unbound by roads or rivers. Meanwhile, Nas, an Ingenuity helicopter buzzing through Martian thin air, could be a scene ripped from Sumerian tablets describing the god Ningersu's windbird, scouting barren lands beyond human reach. These aren't accidental similarities, they're the culmination of humanity's oldest imaginings, now dressed in circuit boards instead of sacred symbols. Look deeper and the parallels grow uncanny. The Department of Defense's micro-drone swarms, moving as one intelligent cloud, fulfill the Zuni legend of the Shalako spirits, countless divine messengers traveling in perfect unison. Agricultural drones spraying crops with pinpoint accuracy mirror the Aztec maize goddess Chicomacoatl, whose flying attendants were said to bless fields with divine mist. Even the Mars rover's autonomous navigation systems echo the Babylonian Zu bird, a mechanical automaton programmed to follow celestial paths written in cuneiform code. Every breakthrough in drone technology seems to unlock another layer of mythological foresight, as if our ancestors left us a treasure map to the future written in allegory and dream logic. This raises the provocative possibility that myths weren't just flights of fancy, they were cultural incubation chambers for technological evolution. When Native American tribes spoke of thunderbirds controlling weather, they unknowingly outlined the principles behind modern cloud-seeding drones. The Buddhist skygoers, who reportedly transported relics across mountain ranges, described the same logistics networks now serviced by cargo drones in the Himalayas. Even drone racing finds its precursor in the Welsh myth of Gwydion's magical birds, said to outmaneuver each other in aerial contests of skill. The patterns suggest something profound. Humanity's collective imagination has been reverse engineering future tech through stories for millennia, long before the physics existed to build them. Yet the most haunting connections emerge in drone warfare. The MQ-9 Reaper's silent loitering over conflict zones fulfills the Greek harpies' role as snatchers who watched and waited before striking. The eerie wail of Turkish Bayraktar drones mirrors the banshee's cry from Celtic lore, both serving as psychological weapons before projectiles fall. Most chillingly, autonomous drones making kill decisions without human input realize the alchemist's darkest warnings about homunculi turning against their creators. These parallels force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Every fearsome aspect of drone technology was prefigured in our cautionary tales, as if myths were ethical stress tests for inventions we hadn't built yet. But the connection flows both ways. Just as myths shape technology, modern drones are rewriting ancient stories in real time. When a DJI Phantom captures footage of a previously inaccessible Mayan temple, it's continuing the work of Kukulkan's feathered scouts. Search and rescue drones combing disaster zones fulfill the Maori hero twins, myths where bird spirits located survivors in rubble. Even citizen scientists sending drones to monitor endangered species are channeling the protective role of the thunderbird, using aerial guardianship to maintain ecological balance. This symbiotic relationship suggests myths and drones aren't in opposition, they're collaborators across time, each generation adding new verses to humanity's epic poem of flight. So did myths predict drones, or did drones fulfill myths? The answer lies somewhere in between. These stories weren't crystal balls, they were cultural compasses, pointing consistently toward our aerial aspirations. From the wax wings of Icarus to the carbon fiber blades of a Matrix drone, the through line remains unbroken. We were always meant to fly, to see, to connect across distances. The drones buzzing through our skies today aren't just technological marvels, they're the physical manifestations of stories whispered around fires for thousands of years, proof that imagination is the first and most powerful engineering tool we possess. Every myth about winged messengers wasn't describing the impossible, it was issuing an invitation, one we've finally learned how to accept. From the bronze sentinel Talos patrolling Crete's shores to the Abathakathi witches riding night winds on woven mats, humanity's oldest stories pulse with drone-like visions. The Mayans mapped aerial reconnaissance with jewel-eyed bird gods, while Ezekiel's spinning wheels encoded gyroscopic flight principles millennia before engineers coined the term. These parallels aren't mere coincidence, they're evidence of a shared cognitive blueprint, where human imagination repeatedly circles certain technological truths long before science catches up. Take the most striking echoes. Norse sagas gave Odin autonomous scouts in Huginn and Muninn, their neural link to their master mirroring today's real-time drone feeds. Hindu Vimanas weren't just flying chariots, they were described with mechanical specificity, from mercury vortex engines to targeting systems that reduced cities to ash. Even King Solomon's wind riding carpet, adjusting its size for payloads like a modern cargo drone, reveals how ancient minds conceptualized adaptive aerial logistics. The common thread, a persistent vision of unmanned flight blending surveillance, delivery, and warfare, the exact triad dominating drone development today. But here's the unsettling question lingering behind these parallels. Are we inventing or remembering? When medieval monks sketched gear-feathered birds in manuscript margins, were they dreaming forward or documenting fragments of lost knowledge? The Zulu Abathakathi's stealth tactics align too precisely with modern radar evasion to dismiss as fantasy. Da Vinci's ornithopter designs, inspired by myths of Icarus, now fly as biomimetic drones at Harvard. This pattern suggests something profound, that myth isn't just proto-science fiction, but a cognitive workshop where humanity stress-tests ideas across generations. Perhaps the ancients lacked lithium batteries and carbon fiber, but they grasped the essence of drone technology's promise and peril. Talos's unchecked autonomy mirrors debates over AI-driven strikes. The Tengu's ethical duality, protector or predator, parallels concerns about surveillance overreach. Even Solomon's lost flying carpet serves as a cautionary tale about technology outpacing wisdom. These stories weren't predictions, they were preparation, equipping us with narrative frameworks to navigate innovations they could never build. So the next time a delivery drone whirs past your window or a news report shows quadcopters mapping disaster zones, listen closely. That hum isn't just motors, it's the sound of centuries-old dreams clicking into place. The real mystery isn't whether myths predicted drones, but why human imagination keeps returning to these aerial archetypes. Are we bound by some deep intuition about how technology must evolve? Or is the sky simply the next frontier every civilization rediscovers? Drop your theories below, and if you're hungry for more connections between ancient visions and modern tech, hit subscribe. The past isn't done